Sometimes it can be hard to know where you want to gear your revision, especially when you're exploring the play character by character. In this video, I'm going to analyse 10 of my favourite juicy quotations spoken by Macbeth, just to give you a head start with your revision. I've tried to select ones that aren't as typical or as obvious as "is this a dagger?" because it's so easy to remember anyway, and hopefully these are a little more original for you. You can also watch the ways that I annotate these quotations and apply this skill to your annotations of others you like and others you already remember well. Essentially, I want to make it clear that you don't have to stick to these quotations rigidly. You might have other quotations that you know you can say lots about. So, I'm going to explore them in chronological order so that you can see any developments in character and see if you can draw any links between quotations as well, because that's a really, really brilliant skill to have for your essays too. Now, this quotation that you can see here are the very first words spoken by Macbeth on stage. It seems silly to ignore this, as it's clearly a significant moment in the play, and Shakespeare has clearly thought carefully about the first words his tragic hero says. He's with Banquo following his success in battle, and is just about to meet the witches, unbeknownst to him. So Macbeth says, "So foul and fair a day I have not seen," and in a literal sense, Macbeth just states that the weather is unnaturally foul, but he also recognises the fact that the day is fair, as Scotland are now victorious in battle. And fair here means good, essentially. However, if we look deeper, it seems to reflect an inner conflict and confusion. He doesn't know how to feel. He seems overwhelmed, particularly emphasised by the fact he has never seen anything like this before. What he is seeing, he has never seen anything like it before. This ultimately foreshadows his inner conflict later, deciding whether to go ahead and pursue his ambition and power or kill King Duncan. Further to this, the fact that the weather is unnaturally foul sets the tone for an ultimately tumultuous narrative, but he is unable to recognise this in the moments to come. Rather than doubt the witches, he is completely intrigued by their offerings. More interesting still, these words you'll have noticed are very similar to that of the witches in Act 1, Scene 1, with their paradoxical statement, "fair is foul and foul is fair." Therefore, Shakespeare is clearly exposing the influence they will have on him and the fact that his entanglement with the supernatural is imminent. Or, on the other hand, perhaps he is foreshadowing Macbeth's capability for evil. If his words are similar to that of fiendish forces like witches, perhaps this should act as a warning or clue to the audience that he isn't the noble, brave and worthy gentleman we heard he was in Act 1, Scene 2. Okay, moving on to our second quotation, we've got "Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires" from Act 1, Scene 4. So a little bit about where this one comes from. Macbeth has already seen the witches at this point and has been given the title of Thane of Cawdor too, so he's really starting to believe the witches' prophecies. However, he has just heard that Malcolm, King Duncan's son, receives the title of Prince of Cumberland, and that in other words just means the next King of Scotland. So whilst one prophecy appears to have come true with him becoming Thane of Cawdor, it seems impossible in this moment that he will naturally become king. Therefore, this quote reveals Macbeth's inner conflict and his desire to conceal his dark ambitions. It symbolises his wish to hide his intentions from both the world and even himself. The imagery of light and darkness play a crucial role here. If light is symbolic of goodness and purity and darkness symbolic of evil and concealment, this motif mirrors the public perception of Macbeth as a valiant hero despite his dark, concealed intentions. Looking more closely at some of the words as well, we have words that are pluralised, stars and desires, which is suggestive of the fact that his desires, and there seem to be multiple now, are so intense that all stars must be hidden, so there is absolutely no light shed on his intentions. And in the book of Genesis, there are 7 days of creation by God. The first thing God did was separate the light from dark, introducing light. Macbeth, in a sense, becomes an inversion of this creation. If all things light and living came originally from darkness, Macbeth here represents all things black and evil, as he does not wish to emerge from this darkness, and rather, his evil desires can stay protected and hidden there. Finally, the fact that his desires are deep is suggestive of the fact that they are entrenched within him and intensely felt. It is now not something he can easily shake off. These desires are embedded and fixed in his psyche, Next up, we have this quote here. We still have judgment here that we but teach bloody instructions, which being taught return to plague the inventor, from Act 1, Scene 7. So in this soliloquy from Act 1, Scene 7, Macbeth actually almost talks himself out of murdering Duncan. He lists reasons why he thinks it's immoral, including the fact that Duncan is loved by all and actually trusts Macbeth to protect him. Here specifically, he is saying that by committing evil deeds yourself, you only encourage violence elsewhere and it will come back to bite you. He recognises the consequences of immorality here. Now, this awareness of even-handed justice serves as a reminder of the biblical principle of reaping what you sow. Now, this is from Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. And then you have the phrase bloody instructions, which is a euphemism for murder. And a euphemism is a phrase where you avoid saying something that might offend someone, so you say it in a different way where it's more carefully put so you don't upset someone. But this is a soliloquy, so there's no one listening. He's saying this to himself. So it's almost as if he doesn't want to accept that reality of murder and regicide. So clearly it hints at a clear discomfort with not just the word, but the act itself. Furthermore, he talks of violent acts coming back to plague the inventor. A plague is, of course, a widespread disease, and so metaphorically, this exposes regicide as a widespread disease that will not only affect Macbeth's conscience, but will plague Scotland with turmoil too. This plague, and he seems fully aware of this here, will lead to his downfall. This symbolically serves as yet another warning to the audience about the consequences of regicide. Overall, this language clearly exposes Macbeth's deep-seated unease and foreshadows the consequences he and the rest of Scotland will be subjected to. So you can see here that Macbeth is aware of the risks of their machinations, or their plans in other words, yet he is bound by his vaulting ambition, and so is of course easily talked back into the deed when Lady Macbeth manipulates him following this very soliloquy. In this quotation, Macbeth reveals his growing instability. This comes during the soliloquy just before he is about to commit regicide. He hallucinates a dagger, arguably a manifestation of his guilt and a symbol of the instability he will experience mentally. So he says, "Art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat-oppressed brain?" in Act 2, Scene 1. Don't forget, he is a man about to commit an act so sinful it's almost as if God is warning him of the consequences of transgressing the divine order. Now, if we look at the language, he actually has to challenge and question himself to ensure he can keep hold of his sanity. This hallucination, coming from what Macbeth thinks is a fever or a heat-oppressed brain, metaphorically aligns Macbeth's murderous intentions with physical sickness. It seems as if Shakespeare is suggesting that his moral descent has led to his mental descent. He will no longer experience peace anymore. His crimes are already affecting him in a tangible way, with the word heat being a visceral image, one that we can feel. This foreshadows his permanent suffering and the damnation that he will experience following the murder. Shakespeare is warning of the inescapable consequences of regicide, both physical and mental. This quotation is from Act 2, Scene 2, and Macbeth says, "I had most need of blessing, and amen stuck in my throat." So this is immediately following the murder, and he immediately recognises his own damnation too. He is visibly panicked and remorseful, especially considering he hears voices telling him Macbeth shall sleep no more, along with the fact he finds himself unable to pray specifically here. This quotation ultimately illustrates his mental turmoil and the powerful influence of his ambition and guilt. Macbeth tells Lady Macbeth of the prayers he hears from the two anonymous voices, and his inability to say amen starkly illustrates his spiritual estrangement following the regicide. His realisation that he can't pray magnifies his distance from God and the divine order, marking the beginning of his eternal damnation. Don't forget, the belief was that a king was chosen by God, so by committing regicide he has committed the ultimate sin. This quotation proves that the consequences are immediate and inescapable. Now, specifically, the idea that the word gets stuck in his throat is quite a visceral image. And by visceral, again, I mean you can almost feel it yourself. It's painful and it conjures images of coughing or choking, reflecting the pain he feels without his ability to seek God. This moment, reflective of the biblical principle that sin separates man from God, highlights the profound moral and spiritual consequences of Macbeth's actions. It's really clever again from Shakespeare, as it is a clear warning to a Jacobean audience following the gunpowder plot. Through this moment, he is making it clear to them that there are consequences when challenging the divine right of kings. It also acts as a subtle way of supporting King James too, by denouncing regicide and exposing the punishments that come with it. So this is Act 3, Scene 2, and Macbeth says, "O full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife. Thou knowest that Banquo and his fiancé lives." So as a little context again, by this point Macbeth has decided to have Banquo and Fleance killed, as they are both a threat to his security as king. He thinks back to the witches, warning that Banquo shall get kings, and of course is very much aware that Banquo was there for the witches' predictions, and so will of course be suspicious of Macbeth's sudden ascension to the throne. In this particular moment, Macbeth speaks with Lady Macbeth, and it is clear how unstable and paranoid he is becoming. However, he does not reveal his intentions for Banquo and Fleance, revealing a clear restructure of power between the pair. He does, however, reveal the tumultuous state of his own psyche to his wife. The metaphor of his mind being full of scorpions magnifies the debilitating turmoil and lack of peace he is experiencing. So I love this quotation because there's actually so much that you could say about it too. Scorpions are venomous creatures and are of course very frightening creatures too. This image symbolises the toxic thoughts and the sting of guilt that plague Macbeth following Duncan's murder, and the prophecies regarding Banquo's descendants. Scorpions can also paralyse their prey, so Macbeth is metaphorically paralysed by paranoia and fear of losing what he has sacrificed so much for. His obsession with legacy has taken over his mind, and therefore in his own mind he needs to hear that Fleance and Banquo have been killed. And don't forget, he's still worried about Malcolm too. It ultimately never ends for him. He knew immediately after killing Duncan he would never find peace again, being unable to pray and hearing voices that he'll sleep no more. And these are both things that bring people peace. The consequences of regicide were there immediately, and now he is deeply trapped in it all. And finally, just one more way you could look at that idea of scorpions. In some ancient cultures, scorpions are associated with malevolent forces like the devil. Macbeth here could be admitting that he has allowed the devil inside of him. His mind is full of evil thoughts, therefore, and he is tortured by them. So overall, when he says this to Lady Macbeth, there's a desperate undertone to it. He seeks solace in sharing his burden with his wife, indicating the intimacy that once existed between them. However, this intimacy is now tainted by the dark deeds they have committed and the conspiracies they continue to weave. Next up, we've got this quote here: "I am in blood stepped in so far that should I wade no more, returning or as tedious as go over." That's Act 3, Scene 4. In this scene, Macbeth and his wife host a banquet where many Scottish nobles are present. Interestingly, Macduff is not there, a sign of the growing opposition and suspicion against Macbeth. This comment comes at the end of the scene after he has already seen Banquo's ghost and acted suspiciously in front of his guests, who have by this point left. In this quotation, he acknowledges that he is so deeply entangled in his crimes that turning back is as difficult as continuing. This reflects his resignation to his violent path and the point of no return. This isn't the first time he's been aware that his actions will have inescapable consequences either. Quote number 3 is the perfect example of this, but the only difference here is that it's now too late for him to go back, whereas before he still had the opportunity to walk away from it all. Shakespeare's use of the declarative "I am in blood stepped in so far" exposes Macbeth's conscious awareness of the turmoil he has caused himself. The fact that Macbeth says he is in blood is literally an awareness of the blood that is being spilled because of him and his ambition. Symbolically, the fact that he is stepped in so far suggests that he is in a deep state of turmoil. When you add to this the verb wade, which is typically used when talking about moving through deep water, it again suggests that he is deep in trouble. This realisation reflects his entrapment in a cycle of violence of his own making, suggesting that his initial actions have led to unavoidable further crimes. He cannot go back to the Macbeth he was at the start, but he knows continuing will be catastrophic too. This next one, from this moment the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand, is from Act 4, Scene 1. After hearing the witch's prophecies that have exploited his overconfidence, Macbeth resolves to act on his impulses without hesitation. This demonstrates his descent into tyranny and impulsive violence. He is unaware that the witch's words in this scene have been careful and cunning, designed to lull him into a false sense of security. Despite his overconfidence now, he still vows to murder Macduff and his family, without now thinking of the implications of this. In this quote, he simply means the very first things that he feels in his heart, he will act on immediately. The phrase "from this moment" seems to indicate that Macbeth is taking a stance. We already know he's aware that he's in blood stepped in so far, that he can't go back. So this statement here makes it clear that he will absolutely only be proceeding with violence and violence only. Where previously he was aware of the trouble he had got himself into, the fact that he's saying from this moment indicates he is done with doubting himself. He is done with pondering. From this moment, he will not let emotion get in the way. And finally, you've got the repetition of firstlings, which reinforces this too, turning interior feelings into immediate physical action on the exterior. This is ultimately where him and Banquo differ too. Where Banquo was intrigued by the witches on the inside, he did not let his dark thoughts win. Whereas here, Macbeth is letting what goes on inside his head and his heart win. This is quotation number 9, and it says, "And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle," from Act 5, Scene 5. As we move into some quotations from Act 5, I thought this soliloquy was just too important to miss. So far in Act 5, Shakespeare reveals Lady Macbeth as severely mentally unwell. The army is advancing towards Dunsinane, and then in this particular scene, Macbeth has just been told his wife is dead. In this very famous soliloquy, Macbeth reflects on the futility and meaninglessness of life. It reveals his existential despair and the struggles with his power and ambition. Now, I chose this quotation because it's a famous soliloquy, and you can easily remember things like tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, and life's but a walk in shadow. In this one, you've still got that very clear nihilism, which means that you see life as pointless. But you've also got biblical allusion too, which I think is really interesting to talk about, especially when Macbeth is now so estranged from God. So first of all, to be clear, he just literally means that all days just lead us to death. The phrase dusty death is firstly alliterative, and therefore harsh and stark, revealing the harsh reality of life ending in death, according to Macbeth now. The phrase conveys a sense of decay and impermanence, echoing the theme of transience and his feelings of nihilism that run throughout this soliloquy anyway. But then you've also got the biblical allusion to Ecclesiastes 3:20, where it says, "All go unto one place, all are of the dust, and all turn to dust again," which emphasises that we all live and we all die, ultimately reflecting the inescapable nature of death for all living beings. It's almost ironic that Macbeth's language connects to the Bible here, as he is undoubtedly damned in the eyes of a Jacobean audience after going against God by killing King Duncan. It could be a desperate attempt from Macbeth to seek approval from God, despite this being absolutely futile. Okay, so this is our final quote for this video, and it says, "Accursed be that tongue that tells me so, for it hath cowed my better part of man, and be these juggling fiends no more believed. I'll not fight with thee." And that's Act 5, Scene 8. So at this point, Macduff has found Macbeth. Don't forget, he's desperate to be the one to kill Macbeth after what he did to his family. This scene is when they come face to face. The army has already taken control of Macbeth's castle, and Macbeth has already been fooled by the witches once. They told him that Macbeth shall never vanquished be until Burnham Wood to high Dunsinane Hill, which was a trick to make him think he'll not be harmed unless trees move up the hill towards his castle. He obviously doesn't think this is possible, but the army actually used branches as camouflage. So he's already realised he's been fooled once, and in this scene he still bizarrely believes that he is protected by the other witch's prophecy. This is the one where he's told none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. So here he comes face to face with Macduff, as I say, and again he feels protected because everyone is of woman born in his eyes. However, Macduff reveals he was born from a C-section. Now this is confusing because for us that's still being born from a woman, but Macduff, just before this dialogue you can see on the screen here, admits that he was untimely ripped from his mother's womb. This basically means that she had likely passed away during labour, and so he was removed from her womb, which isn't considered a natural birth. Macbeth, in this quotation that you can see, realises he has been fooled and curses Macduff for revealing this to him because it has ruined his confidence. He says that the juggling fiends, or the witches in other words, are not to be trusted anymore. Then, realising he has been completely fooled, he says he doesn't want to fight with Macduff. He actually does end up fighting though, because he's just too hubristic to admit defeat, just so you know. So, to be honest, this is quite a long quotation. You can see I've cut bits out already with the brackets and the ellipsis. I think the best bits to remember are juggling fiends and I'll not fight with thee. The term juggling, just like an actual juggler, connotes skill, implying that the witch's prophecies are merely skillful illusions designed to lead Macbeth astray. And the word juggling can also be used to describe the ways that information can be presented in a way that gives a particular impression. We know this is true of Macbeth as he is given the prophecies in Act 4, Scene 1, and this gives him the illusion of security. They deliberately presented their information carefully and with cunning to exploit his hubris, and now he is aware of this. By also labelling them as fiends, Macbeth emphasises their malevolent nature and underscores his growing distrust and resentment towards them. This phrase could also be seen as a subtle warning to King James about the juggling fiends that had surrounded him, warning him to be wary of any more juggling plotters following the gunpowder plot itself. Macbeth also declares, "I'll not fight with thee," which marks a significant and almost pathetic shift in his character. In the face of his newfound vulnerability and despair, Macbeth abandons his earlier facade of bravery and fearlessness and decides to avoid a confrontation with Macduff. This refusal to fight symbolises Macbeth's resignation and defeat, as he now knows the futility of continuing to fight against his inevitable fate. Don't forget the witches also told him to beware Macduff, and now it is clear why. This moment essentially reflects his realisation that his once unshakable confidence and ambition have been undermined by the witch's deceit, leaving him powerless and defeated.